He stepped around her like she was a piece of furniture. Not because he was a cruel man, not because he had woken up that morning and decided to be the kind of person who looks through other people. He had simply never been taught to look. That is a different kind of problem, and in some ways, it is a worse one. His name was Colin. Colin Marsh, 34 years old, project manager at a mid-sized logistics company in the city. The kind of man who remembered birthdays on LinkedIn but forgot the names of people who handed him his coffee every morning. He had a nice watch. He returned his shopping cart. He held doors open for people in suits. He was, by every standard measure, a decent man. He just could not see her. Her name was Rania. She arrived at the building every morning at 6:47, which was not an accident. The security guard changed shifts at 6:50, and the new one, a young man named Daryl, always held the side door open for her without being asked. The old one, a heavy-set man whose name she had never learned in 2 years, did not. So she timed herself around people who saw her, and she moved carefully around people who did not. She had learned that early. You do not fight the current. You find the gaps in it, and you slip through. The lobby of the Alderton building was the kind of lobby that cost a lot of money to look like it cost even more money. Marble floors in a pale cream color, 2 long reception desks staffed by women in matching blazers, a wall of glass facing the street that let the morning light in like a slow flood. By 7 in the morning, the light came in gold and flat, and made everything look better than it was. Rania liked that hour. She liked the building before it filled up, the quiet of it, the way her cartwheels echoed differently on empty marble than they did when the lobby was full of footsteps and voices, and the particular kind of noise that comes from people performing their importance. She had a system. Cart first, then the entrance glass, then the reception area, then the main floor space moving outward from the center. She did not need to think about it anymore. Her hands knew the job. That left her mind free, and she used that freedom carefully, running through the day ahead, calculating how much the bus fare had gone up against how much she had left after the electricity bill, reminding herself to call her brother before noon because he had an exam and she had promised. She was always calculating, not because she was anxious, but because the numbers were always close, and someone had to keep watch on them. Colin came through the main doors at 8:15. He was on his phone. He was always on his phone. He wore the same gray coat he had worn every morning since October, and he walked with the particular stride of a man who was almost late but not quite, and who wanted everyone around him to understand the difference. He did not see the wet section of floor she had just mopped. His shoe hit it. He did not fall. He stumbled, one hand going out to the reception desk, catching himself, and then he straightened and looked around the way people do when they hope no one witnessed something embarrassing. Rania had her back to him. She was already 3 feet away, working on the next section. He looked at the wet floor. He looked at her back. He looked at the floor again. He walked around the wet section and continued to the elevator. He did not say anything to her. Not an apology for nearly ruining her clean floor. Not an acknowledgement that she was there. Not even the involuntary eye contact that usually happens when 2 people share a small moment of chaos. He simply did not register her as someone worth speaking to. And the terrible part, the part that sits in the stomach long after the story is over, is that she did not expect him to. She had stopped expecting that years ago. It was not bitterness. It was not defeat. It was just the shape of the world she moved through every day, and she had made her peace with it, the way you make peace with weather. You bring an umbrella. You do not argue with the rain. She finished the lobby by 7:50. She signed the maintenance log, initialed her section, and moved the cart to the service elevator. The security guard Daryl waved at her on her way past. She waved back. That was the whole of it. That was the exchange. Up on the 4th floor, Colin was already in his chair, already in a meeting call, already forgetting the lobby entirely. His day had a shape to it. Calls from 8:30 to 10, a team check-in at 11, lunch at his desk on Tuesdays, back-to-back review sessions in the afternoon. He moved through it with the efficiency of a man who had optimized his hours and taken some quiet pride in that. He was good at his job. He was reliable. His team liked him well enough, in the way that teams like managers who do not make their lives harder. He was not inspired. He was not particularly happy. But he was functional, and function had come to feel like enough. He did not think about the woman in the lobby. She had not entered his mind as a thought. She had passed through his morning, the way the elevator music passed through it, the way the smell of the cleaning product passed through it, registered by the senses, processed by nothing deeper. This is not a story about a bad man. It is a story about a man who had simply never been required to look. Rania, meanwhile, had moved to the second-floor bathrooms, where a leaking pipe had made a mess around the third stall, and someone had not reported it until water reached the doorway. She dealt with it without complaint. She made a note in the log. She tagged it for maintenance. She moved on. Her lunch break was 20 minutes. She ate in the service stairwell on the landing between floors 2 and 3, because the staff room on the ground floor had a television that was always too loud, and conversations she did not have the energy for. The stairwell was quiet. The light was bad. She did not mind. She ate rice from a container she had packed at 5 in the morning before leaving the house. She ate quickly, and without pleasure, not because the food was bad. Her mother had made it, and her mother did not make bad food, but because eating was not, for her, a leisure activity. It was maintenance, keep the body running, move on to the next thing. She thought about her mother while she ate. Her mother had seemed tired that morning, more tired than usual, which was a sentence that had been getting harder to say for the past several months. Tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix. Rania had almost called to check on her twice already, but she knew her mother would answer in that particular voice, firm, slightly offended, the voice that said, "I am fine, stop worrying, you have work." So she ate her rice and she made a list in her head of what she needed to ask the doctor at the next appointment, and she finished eating and she went back to work. At 4:15 she clocked out. She changed out of her uniform in the service bathroom, folded it neatly, placed it in her bag. She tied her scarf. She picked up her bag. She walked through the lobby one more time, not as a cleaner now, just as a woman walking through a door. The lobby was full at that hour, people leaving, phones out, coats on, the particular controlled chaos of an office building emptying itself at the end of the day. No one looked at her on the way out either. She walked to the bus stop, stood in the queue, and checked her phone. Her brother had sent a message. 2 words. Done well. She smiled. She typed back, "Of course you did." She got on the bus. She found a seat by the window. She watched the city move past in the early evening light. The colors of it, the noise of it, all the people in all their separate lives going in all their separate directions. She thought about her mother. She thought about the doctor's appointment on Thursday. She thought about the electricity bill. She thought about whether the supermarket near the bus stop would have the specific kind of yogurt her mother liked, or whether she would have to go further. She did not think about Colin. Why would she? He had not given her a single reason to. He had walked through the same space she moved through every morning, and had managed, across months of doing so, to reduce her entirely to the background noise of his day. She was part of the building to him, part of the infrastructure, as present and as invisible as the marble floor she kept clean. And she had learned to be okay with that, not because it was right, not because it did not cost her something, in the small, accumulating way that invisibility always costs something, but because the alternative, carrying the weight of every person who looked through her, would have crushed her years ago. So she let it go. Every morning, she let it go, and every morning she came back, and she did the work, and she moved through the building like water through a cracked pipe, and she went home, and she fed her mother, and she called her brother, and she checked the numbers, and she went to sleep. And the building did not know her name, and the man in the gray coat did not know her name. And the world, as far as the world was concerned, was going on exactly as it always had. But things were moving, quietly, below the surface, the way water moves before it breaks through. Something was coming that would make Colin Marsh stop walking, that would make him look, that would cost him something. Not money, not comfort, but the easier version of himself he had been carrying around for 34 years without once stopping to question its weight. It had not arrived yet, but it was close, closer than he knew. The call came at 11:43 on a Wednesday morning. Colin was in the middle of a review session when his phone lit up on the table beside his laptop. He had a rule about phones during meetings. He followed that rule for exactly 3 seconds before he saw the name on the screen, Glenview General Hospital, and something in his chest dropped straight through the floor. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back into the window behind him. His team said nothing. They had all heard the word hospital before. They knew what a man's face looked like when the world shifted under him. He was already in the hallway. His mother, Eleanor Marsh, 68 years old, had gone in for what the doctors had been calling a routine procedure for 2 weeks. Routine. He had heard that word so many times in the past month that it had stopped meaning anything. Routine, they said. Day procedure. You can drop her off and come back at 2. There is nothing to worry about. He had believed them. He had dropped her off at 9 in the morning and driven to work and sat through 3 hours of meetings and believed them entirely. Now a nurse on the phone was saying words like complication and monitoring, and just to be safe and could you come in, and his brain was trying to arrange those words into a shape that was not the shape they were forming. He drove too fast. He knew he was driving too fast and he did not slow down. The hospital was 12 minutes away on a good day. He made it in 9. The ICU waiting area on the 2nd floor was a long corridor with plastic chairs along one wall and a nurse's station at the far end, and fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency specifically designed, it seemed, to make everything feel worse. The walls were a pale cream color that had been repainted so many times they had lost any texture. There were 3 vending machines near the elevator, one of which had an out-of-order sign taped to it with medical tape, which felt like a small, unnecessary comment on the whole situation. Colin sat down in a chair nearest the nurse's station. A doctor came out at one point and said things. He retained about 40% of it. Stable, the doctor said. We are watching her. These things sometimes happen in procedures like this, and it does not mean, he lost the thread there, somewhere between watching and procedures. And then the doctor was shaking his hand and walking back through the double doors, and Colin was sitting again, with his coat still on. He did not know how long he sat there. Time in hospital corridors does not move the way time moves outside. It stretches and compresses at the same moment. An hour can feel like 10 minutes. 20 minutes can feel like the rest of your life. He noticed her at some point. Noticed is not quite the right word. He became aware of her, the way you become aware of sound after it has already been playing in the background for a while. She was sitting 3 chairs down from him. Same corridor, same plastic chairs, same bad fluorescent light. Her hands were in her lap. She was dressed in work clothes, dark trousers, a plain top, a jacket that looked like it belonged to a different season, and she had clearly come here directly from somewhere without stopping to change or collect herself, because there was still a faint smell of cleaning solution near the chairs, the kind that clings to fabric even after a shift ends. Colin did not recognize her. Not at first. Why would he? He had never actually looked at her face. What he saw first was the posture, the particular way she was sitting, very straight, shoulders held with the deliberate tension of someone who has decided they are not going to fall apart and is having to work at it. One hand was resting flat on her thigh, fingers spread, palm down, like she was pressing herself to stay in the chair, like gravity was a decision she was making. He looked at the curtained bay at the end of the corridor, the one she was facing. There was a gap at the bottom where light came through, and through that gap he could see the foot of a hospital bed and the shape of someone lying in it. She was not looking at Colin. She was not looking at anything in particular. Her eyes were on the gap in the curtain, steady and unmoving, and she had the expression of someone who had been in this corridor before, not this specific corridor, but this specific experience, and knew its rhythms and its silences, and had made a kind of home inside them out of sheer necessity. He looked away. He checked his phone. 3 messages from his team, all saying variations of the same thing. Let us know. We're here. Take all the time you need. He put the phone face down on the chair beside him. The corridor was quiet. 2 other families were scattered further down, speaking in low voices. A nurse walked past with a clipboard. The vending machine with the out-of-order sign hummed anyway, as if it had not gotten the message about itself. He heard, then, and this is the sound he would remember longest out of everything that happened that day. A voice, low and continuous, coming from behind the curtain, talking, not to anyone outside the curtain, to the person inside it. It was her. She was talking through the gap. He could not hear the words clearly, just the tone, steady, low, with a rhythm to it like someone who has been doing this a long time, like someone who is fluent in the language of sitting beside a bed and talking to a person who may or may not be fully aware you are there, but to whom you continue to speak regardless, because the alternative is silence, and silence is a thing she apparently refused to offer. Colin sat very still. He did not know why he had gone so still. Some part of him understood, in a way that his thinking mind had not caught up with yet, that he was witnessing something he was not supposed to be able to categorize quickly, something that required him to actually pay attention. He paid attention. She reached through the gap in the curtain. Her arm disappeared inside, and when she pulled it slightly back, her hand was holding another hand, an older hand, the knuckles larger, the skin carrying the particular texture of a life lived in hard work. She held it the way you hold something you are afraid to squeeze too tight, and afraid to loosen at the same time. She kept talking, low, constant. Colin felt something move in his chest that he had not felt in some time. He would not have been able to name it precisely. It was not pity. Pity looks down. This was something else, something that sits at eye level, something that says, I see you. Not the way I should have seen you, but I see you now. He still did not know who she was. His brain was doing the kind of slow, reluctant calculation that brains do when they are trying to match a person in one context to a memory that was never properly formed in the first place. She turned slightly to reach into a bag at her feet, and the light caught her profile, and something shifted. Something clicked. Not fully, not clearly, but the beginning of it. The beginning of recognition. He knew that face from somewhere. He did not know from where. He went back to watching the curtain. A few minutes later, she straightened in her chair, and for a moment her shoulders dropped. Not in surrender exactly. More like a pause, a brief structural concession to the weight of everything. And she closed her eyes. Just for a moment. 10 seconds maybe. The way people close their eyes in a corridor when they think no one is watching and they need to remember what their own face feels like from the inside. Then she opened them again, squared herself, went back to talking. He had a mother behind a set of double doors who might or might not be stable, and he was watching a stranger he almost recognized hold her own mother's hand through a gap in a curtain and talk to her without stopping. And somewhere inside all of that, he was starting to feel the first tremors of a question he had been avoiding for a long time. Not about the woman, about himself, about what kind of man walks through the same space as another person every morning and manages to perform that invisibility so thoroughly that when he sees that same person in a hospital corridor in crisis, he does not even recognize her face. He did not let himself finish that thought. Not yet. It was too sharp, and the day was already full of things that hurt. He got up. His legs needed moving. He walked to the end of the corridor and back. He looked at the vending machines without wanting anything from them. He looked at the clock on the wall, which said 2:45, which meant he had been here for almost 2 hours. When he came back to his chair, she had the food out. A container, white plastic, old but clean, wrapped in a cloth, one of those printed cotton wrapping cloths that grandmothers use, the kind that always smell faintly of a kitchen. She unwrapped it, and the smell that came from it. Rice, something warm and spiced in the way of a home meal, rather than a restaurant, something cooked by someone who knew exactly what this person needed, moved through the sterile corridor smell, like a small, insistent proof of love. She had fed her mother. That is the only way to put it. Spoon by slow spoon, her arm through the gap in the curtain, saying something each time before the spoon went in. Encouragement, probably, or a gentle instruction, or simply the word open, which is the oldest and most tender thing one person can say to another in that context. It took 20 minutes. She was patient in a way that was not the patience of someone naturally calm. It was the patience of someone who had practiced it until it became a skill. The patience of a person who has learned that some things cannot be hurried, and has stopped fighting that fact. When she was done, she wrapped the container back in the cloth and put it in the bag and sat back in her chair. Colin was staring. He was not trying to be subtle about it anymore, though she had not looked at him once, and so it did not matter. He was watching her the way you watch something that is rearranging your understanding of a situation you thought you had already understood. He had spent his entire adult life moving efficiently from one place to another, He had been proud of that. In the quiet way you are proud of things you do not examine too closely. He had optimized his hours and streamlined his thinking, and cut down on everything that cost time, and produced nothing measurable. He had built a life that was clean and fast and functional. And this woman had spent her morning on her knees cleaning his building, and then come straight from that job to this corridor, and sat in this chair, and held her mother's hand, and fed her mother a home-cooked meal, through a gap in a curtain, without asking anyone for anything, or expecting anyone to notice. And she had done it all with the quiet efficiency of someone who has no other option. And also, and this is the part that got him, the part that he would carry out of that corridor, without any trace of self-pity. None. Not a gram of it. He had felt sorry for himself 3 times already today. He had thought, twice, about how unfair it was that this had happened on such a busy week. He had checked his phone for messages from work, even though he was sitting 30 feet from an intensive care bay, where his mother was on a monitor. She had not checked her phone once. He did not think about that at length. He tucked it away, the way you tuck away things that are too uncomfortable to look at directly, in the middle of a hard day, and he went back to watching the curtain. At some point he must have moved, or made a sound, because she turned. And he saw her face properly for the first time. And then he knew. The lobby, the marble floor, the cart with the squeaky wheel. The wet section he had nearly slipped on. The back turned toward him as he walked around the damp floor and continued to the elevator. Her. The recognition landed slowly, the way heavy things fall in water. And with it came something else. Not shame, exactly. Not yet. But the pressure that comes before shame. The tightening that tells you a reckoning is approaching, and you are not ready for it. She looked at him without expression. Not hostile. Not warm. Just looking, the way you look at someone you do not yet know what to make of. He looked back. For the first time in the months they had shared a building, they were actually looking at each other. Neither of them said anything. The corridor hummed. The vending machine hummed. His mother was behind one set of doors, and her mother was behind a curtain, and they were sitting 3 chairs apart in the ugly light of a hospital corridor, with everything unspoken between them, and nothing between them at the same time. He was the first one to look away. He looked at the floor. He thought about the lobby. He thought about every morning he had walked through it. He thought about a wet floor and a back turned toward him, and the absence, across all those mornings, of even the most basic human acknowledgement. He sat with that for a while. It was not comfortable. It was not supposed to be. He got up 15 minutes later. Not because he had decided anything, not because he had landed on a plan or worked out what he was going to say, or convinced himself it was the right move. He got up because he could not sit still anymore, with everything pressing in on him from all sides, and movement was the only thing he had left that felt like control. He walked to the vending machines. He stood in front of them for a moment. The one on the left had tea, the kind that comes out of a machine and tastes like warm dishwater with aspirations. He pressed the button anyway. Then he pressed it again. 2 cups. He stood there with 2 cups of bad hospital tea in his hands, and he looked at them, and he thought about the 37 things that could go wrong about what he was about to do. He thought about how she might look at him. He thought about how little he had earned the right to stand in front of her with anything, even something as small as a cup of tea, and expect it to mean something. He thought about the lobby. He thought about the wet floor. He thought about 3 months of walking through the same space as another human being, without once registering that she existed as a person rather than as a function. He walked back anyway. She did not look up when he approached. She was looking at the curtain, which had been drawn a little further shut now, and her hands were back in her lap, and she was very still in the way that people get still when they are working very hard on the inside and have nothing left to spare for the outside. He stopped in front of her. She looked up. He held out one of the cups. For a moment she just looked at it, not suspiciously, more like she was trying to figure out what category of thing this was. An offering, a gesture, an apology that did not know how to be an apology yet. She looked at the cup, then at his face, then at the cup again. She took it. "Your mother?" he said. It was a stupid opener. He knew it was a stupid opener the moment it left his mouth. There was an entire hospital around them, and everyone in it had someone behind a door somewhere. It was the most obvious possible thing to say, but she did not seem to hold it against him. "Yes," she said. Her voice was steady, quieter than he expected. "Mine too," he said. He gestured vaguely toward the double doors at the end of the corridor. "Back there." She nodded once. A small nod. The kind that says I understand without asking for more details than you want to give. He sat down. Not 3 chairs away this time, 1 chair away. The normal social distance of 2 strangers in a waiting room, who are no longer entirely strangers but have not yet figured out what they are instead. He drank the tea. It was as bad as he had expected. He wrapped both hands around the cup anyway, because the warmth was something. "It is terrible," he said, meaning the tea. She looked at hers. She took a sip. She made a small expression that was not quite a face, and not quite a smile, but somewhere between the two. "It is," she agreed. "Thank you." They sat. The corridor did its corridor things around them. A trolley went past. A nurse spoke quietly into a phone at the station. Somewhere further down, a child's voice asked a question, and a man's voice answered it. "I see you," Colin said. She looked at him. "In the building," he said. "The Alderton. I work there. 4th floor." He paused. "I should have said that better." There was a silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but full. The kind of silence that happens when one person has said something true, and the other person is deciding what to do with the truth of it. "I know which building," she said. "I know you do." He looked at the cup in his hands. "I did not know your name. I have worked there for 3 years, and I did not know your name." She said nothing to that. She did not need to. The fact of it was sitting right there between them, and they both knew it, and filling the silence with explanation would not have added anything. "Rania," she said after a moment. He looked up. "Colin." She nodded. Not warmly, not coldly, just filing it away, the way you file away information that may or may not prove useful. They went back to not talking, but it was different now. The silence had a different weight. It had been properly introduced to itself. After a while he asked about her mother, carefully, not in the way people ask questions to fill silence, but in the way people ask questions when they actually want to know the answer and have decided to risk it. She did not tell him everything. She gave him the shape of it. Her mother had been in and out of health difficulties for 2 years. This had been a bad week. She had come in that morning for a check, and the check had turned into a stay, and the stay had turned into this. The curtain, the gap, the hand through it. He listened, properly listened, without waiting for his turn to speak. "She is sleeping now," Rania said. "She sleeps better when she hears me talking. She says it stops the quiet from being too loud." He thought about his own mother saying something like that. He thought about whether he would have known to stay and talk if it were him. He did not know the answer. A doctor came through at some point and spoke to Rania in a low voice. Colin moved 1 more chair down to give them space. He watched her receive the update with a face that showed almost nothing, not because she was not feeling things, but because she had become expert at managing her face in these moments, at keeping it in a shape that would not alarm her mother, if her mother were to suddenly look up. "You practice that in hospitals," he was starting to understand. "You make your face a neutral thing. You save the other face for later, for somewhere private." When the doctor left, she sat back down. "They want to keep her tonight," she said. "Maybe tomorrow also." He nodded. "My shift starts at 6:45 tomorrow," she said. It was not a complaint. It was not even really said to him. It was just a fact she was arranging alongside the other facts, putting them in order, working out the puzzle of the next 24 hours. "Can you swap it?" he asked. She looked at him. "The shift," he said. "Can someone cover?" The look she gave him was patient, in a way that made him feel, briefly, like a student who has asked a question that reveals a gap in his understanding, so fundamental that the teacher is not sure where to begin. "No," she said simply. He understood, or he started to. He was beginning to understand that the kind of work she did not come with the same cushions his did. No one was going to tell her to take all the time she needed. No one was going to send her supportive messages. The shift started at 6:45, and if she was not there, The shift did not start, and the consequence of that was immediate and practical, and not something she could absorb, the way he could absorb a missed day. He sat with that. It was not a comfortable thing to sit with. It had edges to it. "How long has she been sick?" he asked. 2 years, Rania said. 2 years and 3 months. The precision of that, not 2 years, but 2 years and 3 months, told him something. The way a person counts time in those small exact units means the time has mattered, means each month has been its own event, its own set of appointments and adjustments and recalculations, means she has been carrying a calendar in her chest for 2 years and 3 months, and has not put it down once. "Is your father—" He stopped. He was not sure he had the right to finish the question. She finished it for him. "No," she said. "Not for a long time." She said it the way you say the weather in a country you have already moved away from, present tense in the fact, past tense in the feeling. He understood he was not meant to respond to it, so he did not. They sat in silence again, but it was a different silence than before. It was the silence that forms when two people have exchanged enough truth that they no longer need to fill the space between them with noise. Colin looked at the double doors. "She came in this morning," he said. "Routine procedure, they called it. Day procedure. I drove her and left." He shook his head. "I had a meeting." "You did not know," Rania said. "No," he said. "But I also did not stay. I could have stayed. I had a meeting and I left, and I told myself routine meant fine." She did not tell him it was okay. He appreciated that. He had half expected her to. The way people offer quick absolution because the alternative is letting someone sit in their own discomfort, which can feel unkind even when it is exactly what is needed. She did not offer him that. She just sat with him. Which was better? The afternoon stretched. The corridor did not change. The lights kept humming. Someone brought a pillow for the family further down. A shift change happened at the nurse's station, and a different face appeared behind the desk, and the new nurse read through the notes and nodded and picked up a phone, and the whole machine kept turning. At some point, Colin realized he was not watching the double doors anymore. He was watching the woman next to him, watching her in the way that happens when you have stopped processing a person in terms of categories. Not cleaning lady, not stranger, not the inconvenient background detail of your morning, and started processing her as just a person, with the full weight that word carries. He watched her, and he felt something he had not felt in a long time, something he recognized dimly from a younger version of himself, who had not yet learned to be efficient. It was the feeling of being confronted with someone whose life you have been failing to see, and having to reckon with what that means about the kind of person you have been. It was not a pleasant feeling. He did not look away from it. She had taken a small notebook from her bag. She was writing in it. Lists by the look of them. Her pen moved quickly, practically. He could see from the angle that there were columns, numbers maybe, a to-do list, a schedule, the machinery of a life that required constant active management. He thought about his own calendar, color-coded, synced across devices, full of meetings and reviews and deliverable deadlines. He thought about the meetings and deliverables, and then thought about her notebook and the columns and 2 years and 3 months. "Do you have family near here?" he asked. "Someone who can sit with her tonight?" She shook her head. "My brother is 17. He has his finals. So, it is you. It is me," she said. She said it without drama, without the weight of self-sacrifice. Just the plain, factual acknowledgement of a situation that had been true for a long time. He thought about saying, "I am sorry." He thought about saying that a lot in that corridor. He held it back each time, not because it was untrue, but because it felt too small. Like handing someone a paper cup when what was needed was something structural, something that held water. A nurse came out from behind the curtain at around 4 o'clock. She spoke to Rania quietly. Rania listened, nodded, asked one question, listened to the answer. The nurse went back inside. Rania looked at the curtain for a moment. "She is asking for her scarf," she said. Not really to Colin, just out loud. He did not know what to say to that. "She always wants her scarf when she is cold," Rania continued. "She has 3. She only likes the blue one." She reached into her bag. She pulled out a folded piece of fabric. Blue, soft-looking. and she stood and went to the curtain and slipped inside. Colin sat alone for a few minutes. He heard the voice again, Rania's, low and unceasing, talking to her mother. He heard a softer voice respond, thinner, slower, the kind of voice that comes from somewhere that takes effort to reach. He heard Rania say something in a tone that he recognized, even across the distance and the curtain, as the tone people use when they want to sound lighter than they feel. The teasing tone, the pretend annoyed voice, the voice that says I love you without using the words because the words would break the dam. He looked at the ceiling. He thought about the last time he had sat with his mother without a phone in his hand. He tried to remember the last conversation they had had that was not logistical, not about her medications or her upcoming appointment, or whether she needed him to pick anything up. He tried to remember the last time he had just sat with her. He could not remember. That was the thing that broke through. Not the hospital, not the scare, not the doctor's words or the corridor or the bad fluorescent light, or even the cup of terrible tea. It was that small, ordinary failure of memory. The inability to reach back and find a moment that should have been plentiful and instead found almost nothing there. He put his face in his hands for a moment. Just a moment. When he took them away, Rania was back in the chair next to him. She looked at him. She did not say anything. He shook his head slightly. No explanation. Just an acknowledgement that something had shifted. She nodded once, like she understood. Like she already knew exactly what that particular shift felt like. He did not leave the hospital that evening. He had meant to. At some point around 5 o'clock he had told himself he would go home, shower, eat something that was not from a vending machine, come back in the morning with a clearer head. He had the thought completely. He had even picked up his coat. Then the nurse came out and said his mother was asking for him, and the coat went back over the chair, and he went in. Eleanor Marsh was smaller than he remembered her being. That is the first thing he noticed every time, in every hospital room, every time she had ever had to be in one, that she was smaller inside the bed than she was in the rest of life. In life she was a woman, who took up the right amount of space, and then some. She had opinions about things and she stated them, and she made proper food on Sundays, and she knew the names of all her neighbors and all their children, and she had never once asked Colin for anything without having already thought through whether asking was reasonable. Here she looked like a person who had been reduced by something, just slightly, just enough to notice. You did not have to come, she said, which was her way of saying she was glad he had. I was already here, he said. How long? A while. She looked at him with the particular look that mothers develop when their children try to manage the amount of worry they receive. The look that says I can see exactly what you are doing, and I am going to let you do it, because it is kind, and also slightly foolish. Sit down, she said. You look awful. He sat down. He did not disagree. He stayed with her for 2 hours. He turned his phone face down on the bedside table and left it there. He talked to her, not about appointments or medications or anything practical, just talked, about small things, about a show she liked that he had watched a few episodes of so he could tell her about it, about what the city looked like from the hospital window on the drive-in, about nothing in particular, in the way that nothing in particular can be the most important kind of conversation there is. She fell asleep at 7:15, still talking. Her voice tapered off mid-sentence, and then she was asleep, and he sat there for a few more minutes in the quiet of it, watching her breathe in the way that only the people who love someone ever watch them breathe. When he came back out into the corridor, Rania was still there. He had half expected her to be gone. He did not know why. Maybe because he would have gone. Maybe because the version of himself that existed before today would have gone. But she was still in the same chair, her bag at her feet, her notebook closed in her lap, and she was looking at the curtain in the way she had been looking at it all day, steady, patient, present. He sat back down in the chair that had become, over the course of the afternoon, his chair. She looked at him. Better? Yes, he said. She was asking about a television program. The corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. Mine is asking for her prayer beads. We left them at home. Can someone bring them? She thought about it. I will call my brother later, if he is done studying. Does he know where they are? No, she said. But he will find them. He is good at finding things. She said it with a kind of warmth that came from somewhere specific, somewhere deep and private. The warmth of a person who has watched someone grow and taken real pride in what they grew into. He understood, without being told, that her brother was not just her brother. He was one of the reasons she got up at 5 in the morning. One of the reasons the numbers had to be right. How old is he? Colin asked. 17. His name is Omar. She paused. He wants to study engineering. He is very good at mathematics. Is there a plan? For university? She gave him a look that was not unkind, but was very direct. There is always a plan, she said. Whether the plan survives is another question. He understood what she meant. He thought about how many times in his own life he had made a plan that had not survived contact with cost. He thought about how many times he had been able to absorb that failure, call his father, rearrange things, have the cushion that made the failure temporary rather than permanent. He thought about what it cost to not have that cushion. You have a degree, he said. She looked at him. How do you know that? He paused. I do not, actually. I assumed. You assumed correctly, she said. She said it without any edge. She was past the point where being underestimated was something she spent energy on. Commerce, from the city college, graduated 8 years ago. He sat with that. 8 years. A degree. 8 years old, while she spent her mornings with a mop and a cart and a squeaky left wheel. Did you always want to go into? He stopped. He did not know how to finish the question without it sounding the way it would sound. Cleaning? She said. Direct. No sting to it, but no cushion either. I was going to say administration, he said. Or finance. Yes, she said. I applied for those things. For years, I applied. What happened? She considered the question for a moment, not in the way people consider things when they do not know the answer, but in the way they consider things when there are too many answers and they are deciding which one to give. Nothing happened, she said finally, which is its own kind of answer. He understood what she meant. The interviews that went fine and then the silence. The callbacks that did not come. The resumes that landed in piles and stayed there. The specific, grinding experience of being qualified for something and being looked through anyway, in the exact same way that you could mop a lobby floor for 3 years and be looked through by the same pair of eyes every morning. He felt the weight of that land on him in a new way, not as an abstract idea, as something specific, something with his name attached to it. There was a position, he said slowly, a few years ago, entry-level administrative coordinator. I was on the hiring panel. She did not respond. She was watching him with a stillness that was neither accusatory nor forgiving, just watching. I do not remember who we interviewed, he said. I do not remember the names or the faces. I do not remember most of the details. I just remember that we needed to fill it fast, and we went with the person who felt most familiar. He stopped. I am not saying it was you, he said. I have no idea. I am just saying that I was on that panel, and I do not remember anything about it except that we moved fast, and that fast is often another word for careless. She was quiet for a moment. It was not me, she said. I did not apply to your company. He let out a slow breath. But, she said, it was someone. Yes, he said, it was someone. They sat with that. The corridor went on, doing what corridors do. The light kept its hum. A family down the hall laughed at something, a sudden bright sound in the pale cream space, and then it was quiet again. He thought about what to say next, and then stopped trying to think about it. Rania, he said, I am going to ask you something, and I want you to know that you do not have to answer it, and there is no pressure attached to it from any direction. She was looking at him. We have an administrative assistant position open on the 4th floor. It has been open for 2 months. It is not a senior role. It is not particularly exciting, but it is structured hours. It is properly paid, and the team is, they are decent people. Silence. I am not offering it to you, he said quickly. I do not have the authority to offer you anything right now. I am telling you it exists. I am telling you that if you wanted to apply, I would make sure your application was read. Actually read, by someone who was not moving fast. She studied him. Why, she said. It was the right question. He had known it was coming. Because I have been walking past you for 3 years, he said, and I did not see you, and I am not able to undo that, but I can stop adding to it. She looked at him for a long time. He did not look away. What does the role involve? She said. He felt something in his chest release. Not triumph, something quieter than that, something more like the feeling of a door that has been stuck finally opening, slowly, without drama. He told her. He was honest. The repetitive parts, the challenging members of the team, the fact that the coffee machine on the 4th floor had been broken for a month and no one had gotten around to submitting the maintenance request. She listened with the same focused attention she gave everything. She asked 2 questions, both practical and sharp. He answered them. They talked about the role for 20 minutes. It was the most normal conversation he had had all day, which made it also somehow the most extraordinary. At 9 o'clock, a nurse came out from behind the curtain. Rania stood. They spoke briefly. The nurse's face was calm, which Colin had learned to read by now as a good sign in this specific corridor. She nodded a few times. The nurse went back inside. She turned to him. She is sleeping. They say she is comfortable. That is good. Yes. She looked at the curtain. I am going to go in and sit with her for a little while longer, and then I have to go home and see my brother and be back at 6:45. Of course, he said. She reached into her bag. She pulled out the notebook. She wrote something on the bottom of a page, tore it carefully along the edge, and held it out to him. He took it. It was a phone number. Her name above it, written simply. No last name. No title. Just Rania, and the number. In case the position details change, she said, or in case I have questions. He looked at the paper, then at her. I will email you the job listing by Friday, he said. She nodded. She gathered her bag. She looked at him once more, with that direct, level look that had no performance in it. No filter, no concession to social comfort. Colin, she said, your mother is going to be fine. He was not sure how she knew that. She could not have known it in any factual way. But she said it with a certainty that came from somewhere very deep and very earned, the certainty of a person who has sat in hospital corridors for 2 years and 3 months, and developed a sense, almost cellular, for which things were going to hold and which things were not. He believed her. She went through the curtain. He sat in his chair for a moment. The corridor was quieter now, emptying out into the later hours of the evening. He looked at the paper in his hand. He folded it once. He put it in his pocket. He leaned back in the plastic chair, and he thought about 3 years of mornings. He thought about a lobby, and a squeaky wheel, and a wet floor he had nearly slipped on. He thought about the version of himself who had walked through all of it without once slowing down. He thought, who else? Not as a rhetorical question, as a real one. Who else had he walked past? Who else had he reduced to background? How many names did he not know that he should have known? It was not a comfortable thing to sit with. He sat with it anyway. He stayed until the corridor was nearly empty. He stayed until a nurse told him visiting hours were over, and he should get some rest and come back in the morning. He stood, picked up his coat, and walked to the elevator. On his way out, he passed the curtained bay. It was quiet inside now, 2 people breathing, one of them asleep, one of them keeping watch. He pressed the elevator button. He thought about the paper in his pocket. He thought about Friday. He sent the job listing on Thursday. Not Friday. Thursday. He had told her Friday and then gone home and slept 4 hours and woken up at 5:45 with the listing already pulled up on his laptop, and he had looked at the time and thought about what time she would already be awake, already packing rice into a container, already calculating bus fare and medicine schedules and exam timetables, and he had sent it at 6 in the morning, before he had even made coffee. He did not tell her he was sending it early. He just sent it. She replied at 6:23. 2 sentences. Thank you for sending this. I will have a look this evening. That was all. No warmth, no ceremony, no indication that anything unusual was happening. He had not expected any. That was what he was starting to understand about her. She did not perform gratitude for things that were simply correct. She acknowledged them, cleanly, and moved on. as if receiving something that was rightfully yours was a practical matter rather than an emotional one. He thought about that for a long time. His mother was discharged on Friday afternoon. He drove her home. He carried her bag. He made her tea and sat across from her at the kitchen table while she drank it. And for once he did not have his phone on the table between them. She noticed. She did not say anything about it, but she noticed. He could tell from the way she looked at him, with that particular attention she had always had, the kind that made you feel like you were being read somewhere above the level of your words. "You seem different," she said. "I am tired," he said. "That is not what I mean." He looked at her. She had her hands around her cup the same way she always held it, thumbs hooked over the rim. She looked small in her kitchen the way she had looked small in the hospital, but the kitchen had the smell of her particular life in it, the smell of a specific soap and a specific kind of warmth, and it made her less small again. It put her back into herself. "There was a woman at the hospital," he said, "in the corridor. I kept running into her. Well, she was already there. I kept arriving somewhere she already was." His mother watched him. He told her, not the whole of it, but the shape of it, the lobby and the 3 years and the not looking, and then the corridor, and the curtain, and the tea from the machine, and the notebook page. His mother was quiet for a moment. "You sent her a job listing?" she said. "Yes." "On time?" "Early, actually." She looked at him with a different kind of look, not the reading look, something warmer than that. "Good," she said. And then she drank her tea, and that was all she said about it, because his mother had always had the very rare and valuable skill of knowing when a thing had been said completely. Rania applied on Sunday evening. He knew because the system flagged applications as they came in, and he had set up an alert for this particular position 2 months ago and forgotten to turn it off. Her name appeared in his inbox at 9:47 on a Sunday night. Rania Bibi. Cover letter, resume, references. He opened the resume because he could not open it, and he made himself read it the way a hiring panel should read a document, as a record of a person's capability, not as something to skim and file. It was good. Better than good. She had 8 years of experience in building management and facilities coordination that read, when you looked at it properly, as 8 years of operational logistics and team-level administration, dressed in the language of a sector that got less credit than it deserved. Her commerce degree was there, listed plainly. Her references were 2 building managers, one of whom had written a paragraph for her rather than just listing a name and phone number, which meant he thought well enough of her to spend time on it. Colin forwarded her application to the HR coordinator the next morning with a 1-line note. "Please ensure this one is reviewed before the final shortlist closes." He did not tell Rania he had done that either. It was not the kind of thing you tell someone. She heard back on Wednesday. An interview, the following Monday. She messaged him that evening. Same brief, clean style. 1 sentence. "Interview confirmed for Monday. Thank you for whatever you did." He read it twice. He typed back, "I did not do very much. The application did the work." She did not respond to that, which he understood to mean she accepted it as true and saw no reason to dispute it. The interview was conducted by a woman named Patricia, who ran HR with the kind of organized energy that made meetings start on time and decisions happen within the same week they were made. Colin was not in the room. He had made a point of not being in the room. He had flagged the application, and that was the right amount of involvement, and anything beyond that would have been something other than help. Patricia came to his office afterward. "That was a strong interview," she said, standing in the doorway with a folder under her arm. "Where did you find her?" He thought about that. "She found me," he said. Patricia looked at him, as if he had said something either very profound or slightly odd, and she had not yet decided which. She nodded, made a note in the folder, and left. The offer went out on Tuesday. He heard from Rania on Tuesday evening, and it was the most words she had ever sent him in a message. 4 sentences. She had accepted the position. She would give her notice on Wednesday. She wanted him to know that she was not taking the job because of him. She wanted to be clear about that, but she was taking it because it was the right fit and she was ready, and she was grateful the door had been open when she was. He read it 3 times. He replied once, "Good. I am glad the door was open." That was all. It was enough. She gave her notice on Wednesday morning. The facility's supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Greg, who had been running that department for 11 years and had seen plenty of people come and go, took the news with the kind of quiet stoicism that experience tends to produce. He shook her hand. He wished her well. He said she was one of the better ones, and he meant it. She thanked him, and she meant that. She worked her final 2 weeks because that was the professional thing to do, and she was a professional. She pushed the cart with the squeaky wheel through the lobby for 14 more days. She cleaned the marble. She initialed the maintenance log. She signed out at 2:30 and went to the hospital twice that week because her mother had a follow-up. And she went home and fed her, and called Omar, and checked the numbers, and went to sleep. On her last day, Daryl the security guard brought her a card that the facilities team had signed. The card had a cartoon on the front of a broom with a face and sunglasses, and it said something about sweeping into new adventures. It was a terrible card, and she loved it. Greg had also, quietly, organized a small amount in a collective envelope from the team. She had not expected that. She took it without making a fuss of it, because making a fuss of things was not her style. But she held the envelope for a moment in the service stairwell during her break, on the landing between floors 2 and 3 where she had eaten 1,000 lunches in 4 years, and she sat with the feeling of it. Not the money, the gesture, the fact that the people who had worked alongside her, who had pushed carts of their own, and carried the weight of early mornings and late finishes, and underpaid and undernoticed labor, had put their hands in their pockets for her. She was not sentimental, but she was not made of stone either. She folded the envelope into her bag and went back to work. On the last morning, she clocked out at 2:29 instead of 2:30, 1 minute early. She had never done that before. She changed out of her uniform in the service bathroom, folded it neatly, placed it in her bag for the last time. She tied her scarf. She picked up her bag and she walked out through the ground floor and into the lobby, the same lobby she had cleaned for 4 years, the same marble she had been on her knees beside the morning Colin Marsh had stepped around her like furniture. She stood in it for a moment, just a moment. The lobby was full at that hour, people coming and going, phones out, coats on, the usual mid-afternoon rush of bodies and movement. She looked at the floor, cream marble, polished to a low shine. She thought about every morning she had spent on this floor, every bucket of water, every chemical smell, every section initialed in a log that no one ever read. She was not bitter about it. She was not performing the absence of bitterness, the way people sometimes perform forgiveness to seem more gracious than they feel. She was genuinely not bitter. The work had been honest work, and she had done it honestly, and that was a thing she could keep, regardless of what came next. She walked to the main doors and out into the afternoon. 2 weeks later, she walked back in. She was wearing a deep green outfit that had been hanging in her wardrobe for 2 years, saved for something she had not yet found a reason for. She carried a proper bag, leather, second-hand but well-kept, the kind that reads as organized rather than expensive. She had left the house at 7:45, which was the latest she had left the house on a workday in 4 years. She walked through the same main doors. The lobby looked different at 8 in the morning than it did at 6:47. Fuller, brighter. The light from the glass wall was at a different angle, and it fell across the marble in a way that made the floor look gold for a moment, before it resolved back to cream. She went to the elevator. Colin was already there. He was in his gray coat, his phone in his hand, though he was not looking at it. He looked up when she came to stand beside him, and there was a moment, just a small one of those moments that do not announce themselves, where they simply looked at each other. Neither of them said the obvious thing. Neither of them made a speech. Neither of them pointed to the lobby, or the marble, or the 4 years, or the wet floor, or the cup of terrible tea. He pressed the elevator button. She stepped in when the doors opened. He followed. "Different angle," she said, looking at the lobby through the glass doors as the elevator rose. "Yes," he said. The doors closed. The 4th floor came into view as the elevator moved, then the glass of the atrium, then the lobby shrinking below them, the marble, the reception desks, the morning light coming through the glass wall, all of it growing smaller and smaller, as if they were looking down at the past from a comfortable distance. She did not say anything else. Neither did he. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. She walked out first. He held the door behind him. An old habit, automatic, the kind of thing you do without thinking about it. She noticed, because she noticed things. She did not say anything about it. The fourth floor was beginning to fill up around them. Keyboards, voices, the smell of coffee from a machine that had apparently just been repaired. The day was starting the way days do, without ceremony, without announcement, just one moment becoming the next. She went to her desk. He went to his office. The building went about its business. And outside, the lobby continued below them, the marble floor clean and pale and unmarked, and the morning light kept moving across it the way it always had, gold for a moment, and then simply bright. And the cart with the squeaky wheel was being pushed along the far wall by someone new, someone whose name no one on the fourth floor yet knew. The world had not changed, not in any large way, not in any way that would make the news or reshape a history. But something had shifted, in one man. Quietly, at the level of attention, at the level of the small daily decision about where to direct your eyes, at the level of the names you choose to learn and the names you do not bother with, and what that choice says about the shape of the life you are building. He had learned her name. That was not nothing. And she had walked back in through the same door she had mopped behind for 4 years, and she had ridden the elevator to the fourth floor, and she had sat down at a desk where she was paid for the degree she had earned 8 years ago. That was not nothing either. It was, in fact, the whole story. Not a perfect one, not a clean one, not a story where the bad things get properly named, and the right people say the right things, and justice arrives in full and on time. Life does not run on that schedule. But a story where one man stopped moving for long enough to see another person, and where that person, who had been fully herself all along, through all 4 years of being looked through, walked forward when the door finally opened. Not because she needed him to see her, but because she had always been ready for the door, and she had been doing the quiet, steady work of staying ready for longer than he had been paying attention. The elevator went back down. The lobby received it. And the morning kept going.